So let's return, as promised, to our main story, and they are still counting the votes there in Ohio, where the Republican Party is facing a close race in that key election for a House seat, with the US media saying the race in a normally safe Republican seat is still too close to call. Meanwhile, just 3 months ahead of the midterm elections, it's emerged that more women candidates than ever will contest US governorships and also seats in the House. Well, let's discuss all of this with two of our guests. Ron Bonjean, who's a Republican. He's a former spokesman for the Speaker of the House and the Senate Majority Leader, and also Kelly Dittmar, Assistant Professor of Political Science and Scholar at the Centre for American Women in Politics. Thanks, both of you, for joining us here on the programme. Ron, can I come to you first of all? Your explanation as to why Donald Trump won this absolutely comfortably by 11 points back in 2016 has struggled last night in 2018.
Well, usually in off-year elections, when it's only the House and Senate seats that are up for grabs and not a presidential year, usually the party in control does suffer losses. And as you can see here, this is a much more closer race than we have liked. However, it's likely that we're going to win this seat, and a win is a win. What I would say, though, is this is a warning shot to Republicans across the country that are in tighter races. I'm not talking about the tier 1 folks that know they have a tight race. I'm talking about the folks that know that they have a candidate that's competitive running against them. These guys need to wake up and understand that there could be a wave coming, and they need to do everything they can, from the fundraising to showing up to town hall meetings, and really being aggressive in order to try to prevent Democrats from gaining House control.
I can see Kelly nodding in agreement, but before I come to you, Kelly, I mean, Ron, very interesting, you say a wave is coming. Is it a suburban backlash? Will that worry Donald Trump? Should it worry Donald Trump?
Well, I would say this. I would say that, you know, we're going to know in the last couple of weeks of the election, before the election, how this is breaking, because House races tend to break late, what the environment is going to be during that time. And I would hope and encourage that President Trump talks about the economy and talks about the accomplishments of what the Republican Party has done over the last couple of years, because there's a lot of positive things to say, and not focus on what's going on with the Russia investigation or Robert Mueller or any of those things that can take us off message. It's hard to know what environment we're going to be in, but it's going to be very different from today, as it was last week and the week before.
Kelly, let me bring you in, because we've got 173 female nominees for the House so far in these upcoming midterms. We've heard Ron's explanation in terms of what is going on. What is your explanation, your view of things?
Sure. So when it comes to women, already this morning we're now up to 185. So we're just ticking away this morning at our results from yesterday's primaries. So for women, what we're seeing is record levels of women filing for office this year. That has been in the news for much of the cycle thus far. We didn't just break those records, we really busted through, and we're nearly double in the House, for example, of previous records among Democrats. When it comes to nominees, those who have made it through the primaries, again, we're seeing us pretty far surpass. So we have 14 primaries left in the cycle. We're already at 185 women nominees. Our previous record was 167. And when it comes to women running for governor, our statewide executive, we surpassed that record of nominees last night, so we're now at 11. The one thing I will say, though, is as we talk about these record numbers, is that the number that really counts is going to be the one that we see in November on election.
And what is the explanation behind it? Because you're going to have the first all-female ticket for Democrats in Michigan, almost certainly the first Muslim woman in Congress. Are these principally anti-Trump candidates, or has this president energize politics right across the spectrum, so you have female Republicans also entering the race, as well as those Democrats?
So most of what we've talked about as the surge or increase in women candidates at the House and gubernatorial level is happening among Democrats. So it appears that part of that motivation and catalyst is the election of Donald Trump, but a negative reaction to it, a concern about the Republican-controlled Congress and executive branch and what that will do for public policy. That seems to have inspired a lot of Democratic women to run. However, there are Republican women candidates who talk about the fact that Donald Trump as an outsider and his success as an outsider Republican inspired their bid to run for office, and their candidates who run right alongside with him. Not among the least of them last week in Tennessee, Marsha Blackburn, who is now the Senate candidate there and likely to win. And so there are Republican women as well who have a bit of a different story when it comes to what inspired them to run this year or run for higher office.
A few quick-fire questions because we're gobbling through time. Ron, back to you because you spoke about the economic figures. They're clearly good for the president, but is he being harmed by those multitude of controversies, child separations at the border, the Mueller investigation you were talking about, spats with allies, trade wars? Is any of that damaging Donald Trump, do you think?
Well, what I would say is that Trump is the master of his own message. I mean, what he's saying, what he's tweeting dominates the media. And so if he decides to focus on immigration, that's what everyone's going to talk about. If he decides to focus on trade, that's what the media focuses on. So my hope is that he'll be able to focus on the tangible benefits that have resulted for Americans because of Republican control and not get caught up in the day-to-day investigations of Mueller that could take you off message. That would be very concerning a few days before the election to be discussing that and not talking about all the great things that Republicans have done. And I would say, to Trump's credit, that he's also campaigning. He's going to be a fierce campaigner this election and going to be in dozens of
he loves
districts.
campaigning.
And
We've
look what
already
he just
seen
did
that
with the Balderson seat.
In this cycle. Kelly, which issues for women that Trump is pursuing are going down worst?
Yeah, so I think what you see among the Democratic and progressive women that are running this cycle, particularly non-incumbents who got inspired by the last election, what they're talking about a lot are health care, the attempt to repeal the ACA, as well as environmental protections that are being shedded in this administration, and also issues around immigration, gun control, things that have been in the news because of this administration's policies on them or lack of movement on them. And so women who've been activists are really translating that advocacy into candidacy.
Just a final quick word, Ron. It needs to be quick, but I mean, come the midterms, it's a big if, but if they lose control of both the Senate and the House, that's difficult for getting stuff done. But is there also the additional worry, nervousness for Donald Trump that it would potentially bring impeachment a little closer?
Well, look, I don't know what Trump is thinking regarding that. I do think that, though, he would have something to run against while Republicans can completely control Washington. If the Democrats win the House and or the Senate, which is unlikely, but if the Democrats were to win the House, Trump would then have a main adversary to run against in 2020.
Well, I'm glad you're so brief, but thank you both of you for joining.